Hey everybody, and welcome to this episode of Mixed Martial Analysis, where I don't really have anything in particular like that. I got like a laundry list of shit that I want to talk about, but there's no set agenda that I'm following or anything. So I'll be bouncing around from topic to topic, and if I miss anything, leave a question or a comment in the comment section below, and I'll be sure to cover it on the next episode. All right, so I don't think we can talk about anything until we talk about UFC 232, right? Big night of fights. Prelims were exciting. Uriah Hall managed a big comeback in the third round over Bavon Lewis with that knockout after losing the first two rounds, I think, pretty handily. Nathan Wood beat Andreo, and I put too much fucking stock into some fighters based on their performances against UFC vets. Like, I'll give you another example that I did this with is Lando Venata. Not that he's not good, not that he's not talented, but he had that fight against Tony Ferguson where he almost knocked him the fuck out, and I picked him in like every single fight after that to win without even really looking at his opponent or not giving his opponent any credit for anything, you know. So I have a tendency to, like, when fighters have a big fight like that against a big time fighter who's, you know, really proven themselves, I think I have a tendency to be a little bit biased towards them. So I did the same thing with Ewell because he's coming off that big win over Renan Barão, right? But Barão's a guy who's been sliding a little bit lately, so I think I gave him a little bit too much credit. Not that he's not good, but Nathan Wood looked really fucking good. Like, I underestimated how good he was going to be. Ryan Hall defeated BJ Penn in the first round. Hidden Minori roll. And I think that if you listen to the interview that he did afterwards, he makes some really good points about how when you're fighting a guy like BJ, and the same thing kind of applies to a fight on the main card between Michael Chiesa and Carlos Condit, but when you're fighting a guy like BJ, you've got such a large like sample size to look at, and he's been around for so long, and you know it's kind of as you get older, I feel like as you get further away from your prime, you start to revert to things that you know, like your bread and butter. Whereas when you're in your prime, you're more willing to branch out and learn things, and that keeps you up to speed with the ever evolving game of MMA. But like I said, as you start to creep further and further and further away from your prime, you're going to go back to things that you were good at and that you know, and sometimes it's just not enough to keep up in the octagon in a real time situation. You know what I mean? So I think Ryan Hall was right, and I think that's kind of what you ran into there. There was an interesting stoppage with Megan Anderson and Kat Zingano, and you know, the way the fight ended is obviously controversial. I mean, she got poked in the eye with a fucking toe, but what are you supposed to do about that? I don't think there's any rules that need to be changed or anything that we need to go back and edit or look at. When you think about finger pokes, they're illegal, but you can move your fingers, like, right? Like, you can intentionally poke someone in the eye. I guess you could intentionally poke someone in the eye with your toe as well, but when you're throwing a kick and they're moving, I think that's just a freak accident, and kind of, you know, Kat was unfortunately on the receiving end of in a fight that I was interested in seeing play out because, you know, Kat's pretty strong on the ground, and I wanted to see what happened when things got warmed up. You know what I mean? When they really started letting loose, and we never really got to see that. So disappointing that the fight ended that way. But like I said, I think it's just a freak accident. It sucks, but it's just the luck of the fucking draw, I guess, right? So we move on to the main card. Alex Volkanovski knocks out Chad Mendes in the second round, and then Chad Mendes announces his retirement afterwards, which completely threw me off. Especially if you look at the fight that he had before this against Miles Jury, where he knocked him out in the first round, like decisively knocked him out. And Miles Jury is, a very talented young fighter. So I don't know, and I thought he looked competitive in this fight too. I thought he arguably maybe won the first round, had his back at times, like they were going back and forth with some exchanges, but I didn't think it was this case of you saw Chad Mendes in there against this old guy and he looked slow, and you know what I mean? Like, he just looked like, I don't know. It's not like he was fighting someone who wasn't good. He was fighting a top contender in Alexander Volkanovski. I mean, that guy, if he wins his next fight, is probably going to be fighting Holloway for the title. He's really fucking good. Make no mistake. So it's not like I said, it's not like Mendes fought some scrub and looked bad doing it. He looked competitive against one of the best guys in the world, and it just wasn't his night. So disappointing to see him go, but I don't know if that's what he wants to fucking do. I think there are a lot of guys that hang around the game too long. So if his head's not there and he's got other things that he wants to pursue, it's a good thing that he retired. You know what I mean? he should do what he wants to do. Do I think he still has some left in the tank? Yeah, but I don't know. If you're half in and half out, I'm a big fan of just getting the fuck out, because there are a lot of hungry motherfuckers that the only thing that consumes their thoughts is winning a title and training constantly and doing it every day. So if you're like half in, half out, Chad Mendes has had a hell of a fucking career. He's a Hall of Famer, and I don't know. Like I said, I don't really. It's not that I don't agree with the retirement. I do. It's just I do think that Chad Mendes has more to offer to the sport. Disappointing to see him go, but like I said, fuck it. Whatever's best for him. Corey Anderson upset Ilir Latifi with a unanimous decision, and to me, this was the biggest upset on the card, maybe. That's not true, but Ilir Latifi is very good. And I thought that he was going to, be able to handle Corey Anderson in some of the grappling exchanges, but Anderson's wrestling base was able to shut down a lot of that, and his hands look good. And, to be fair, whose hands don't look good under Mark Henry, right? Phenomenally coached. They're all very crisp. The technique is very solid. And, Corey Anderson looked really good, and I think Alexander Gustafsson actually just called him out, and that fight makes sense if you consider the fact that Gustafsson is coming off a loss, and Corey Anderson is coming off a win over Gustafsson's teammate. So, it's not like Gustafsson's just coming off any loss either. He's coming off a loss to Jon Jones, and I think that Alexander Gustafsson is probably still the third best light heavyweight in the world. So this is a big fight for Corey Anderson to take, a big opportunity. I think it's a smart one. I think he goes in and beats Gustafsson. You might be looking at a title shot for him. All right, who was next? Oh, Chiesa and Condit. Chiesa caught Condit in that nasty fucking Kimura in the second round. I guess it was a Kimura, right? Yeah. And one arm, though. I'm a white belt, right? So what the fuck do I know? But when I was watching, I was like, I don't think he's going to be able to finish it from here. And then sure as fuck he did. Great performance from Michael Chiesa, which, by the way, how he ever got to 155 is beyond me. He looked like a middle range to big 170, and the fact that he was fighting 15 pounds below that, I can't even imagine what he must have been putting his body through. That weight cut had to be absolutely fucking brutal, and no doubt it was degrading his performance. No doubt about it. How could it not? How could cutting that much weight, when you look that good at 170, how could, I don't know how he ever fought at 155. Like, how do you cut that much weight and then go in and fight the next day and be able to compete at a high level? It's just, I thought he looked good at 170. I think that's where he's going to hang around at, and big win for him over a legend in Carlos Condit. All right. Amanda Nunes knocking out Chris Cyborg was unexpected, right? I thought that if Amanda was going to win this fight, it was going to be because Cyborg likes to get into some fights where she gets into some heated exchanges and throws a lot of hooks. And I thought if Amanda came right down the pipe, she might be able to, shut some of Cyborg's game plan down. But a couple of things surprised me. First off, when they stood across from each other, when they faced off in the octagon right before the fight started, Amanda looked a little bit bigger than Cyborg, which was shocking. Her arms looked bigger. She wasn't as shredded up necessarily, but she looked bigger than her. And the absolute raw power that she knocked her out with. That wasn't just like a stunning highlight reel knockout for a woman. That was just a stunning highlight reel knockout. That was insane. And the way she went crashing to the canvas after she landed the overhand right was, ugh. She's got freakish fucking power in her hands for a woman. Yes, for a woman, but just in general. If she hits anyone like that, they're going to go down. Unbelievable. And after that performance, I don't know how you can't consider her the greatest female fighter of all time. She's the best. She's beat Valentina Shevchenko twice, Ronda Rousey, Raquel Pennington. She just brutalized her. And then she knocks out the most feared woman in MMA history. Hasn't lost a fight in 13 years since her professional MMA debut in Chris Cyborg. And knocks her out inside of a minute in the first round. She's the best. It's not even close. I don't even think there's an argument. And the way that she won, to me, was so impressive, because I thought that if they got into like a war of aggression and throwing strikes like that, like heavy strikes, that it would favor Cyborg, and it absolutely didn't. I mean, she won that fight so decisively that I don't think there's any doubting it. She's the best. And then, of course, we move on to the main event, and Jon Jones loses to Alexander Gustafsson loses to Jon Jones in the third round. And I'll tell you what frustrates me when people talk about Jon sometimes is he'll have a performance like the first 2 rounds of Gustafsson. Like, you'll hear some people say, like, oh, he started slow and, oh, he was doing this. First off, I thought Jon was controlling range very well. He was throwing his kicks, and he was moving backwards. And I think that if you went back and watched the first 2 rounds over, you'll realize that Gustafsson is slowly getting more and more and more frustrated. He couldn't really land anything clean. When he did, it wasn't really meaningful. And Jon was just... And then you see in the third round, he comes out and takes him down. It's like Jon was lowering him into a trap to try to get him to be more aggressive and then took him down. And then you got people who say, well, you know, DC won the first 2 rounds of their first fight, arguably. And maybe... But if you go back and watch the first 2 rounds, Jon's just lighting him up to the body over it, over again. As soon as that fucking hand drops, Jon's shin is upside DC's head. I mean, there are a lot of things that make Jon Jones the greatest fighter that's ever lived. I want to make the distinction. I've said before that I think DC is the GOAT, right? Like, as far as, and I mean that in terms of what he's been able to, not only in terms of what he's been able to accomplish. He's only ever lost to Jon, but as far as how he represents the sport and the things that he's done for the sport of MMA, and he's such a role model, right? And he does everything right. So if that makes any sense, Daniel Cormier is probably the greatest fighter and representative for the sport of MMA ever, in my opinion. I mean, he's so high level. His wrestling is at an Olympic level. He trains with guys like Luke Rockhold and Cain Velasquez and Habib on a daily basis. And his only loss is against who I think is the greatest fighter ever. I know that doesn't fucking make a whole lot of sense, but DC is probably the greatest fighter in UFC. It's so hard to say that, though, right? Like, I can't say he's the greatest ever because Jon is the greatest fighter ever. I really believe that. I don't think Silva's better than Jon. I don't think Demetrius is better than Jon. I think Jon's the best. I mean, he just does everything so well. And there are a lot of things, like I said, there are a lot of things that make Jon the best. But the thing that is the most impressive about him is his creativeness and his ability to take people into their own element, take them in to... He's able to take what they're good at and use it against them and do it better than them. And he's just got a God-given talent for fighting. I mean, he was blessed with some sort of gift from the MMA gods, and he's brilliant at it. I mean, he doesn't get himself into a lot of dangerous situations. He hardly ever spends time on his back, and when he does, he's right back to his feet. I mean, Gustafsson's the only guy to successfully take him down, right? And he fucking shot right back up. He doesn't spend any time down there. If he does, he's on top, and he manages distance well. His timing is brilliant. We were talking earlier about how when guys start getting further and further away from their prime, they start to get rooted. I think they start to get rooted more in what they were really good at, right? Their bread and butter. And it's like with Jon. Jon is this guy who isn't just testing stuff out in the gym. He'll try it in the octagon, and it just fucking works. Like, for whatever reason, everything he does works. He just knows how to throw it, when to throw it, how to maneuver his body. He understands leverage and timing and distance and everything at a level that I don't think we've ever seen. And maybe this is a very, like, over-exaggerated statement maybe, but I don't know if we'll ever see anyone like him again. He's just like, even his build. Like, he's extremely strong, but he's got these long, rangy limbs, and he doesn't necessarily have one-punch knockout power, but like we just talked about the DC fight, he's able to create opportunities where he can knock people out. I mean, he's just so fucking good at everything. He doesn't really have a weakness. I mean, there's nothing you can really point to in his game where you're like, oh, yeah, Jon's bad at that. Name it. There's nothing. He's great at everything. I mean, and it's not just that he's really, like... It's that he does it against the best in the world religiously, and no one really comes close to beating him. I mean, think about how crazy it is that there are 9 billion people on planet Earth, and we haven't found one that can beat Jon Jones in a fist fight. Don't even call it a fist fight, a fight. It's insane. And, call it what you want. Maybe he, gets maybe he's not like I just talked about how DC's one of the better representatives. Jon probably isn't, right? He's in trouble with the law. He's accused of cheating. He's got stuff in his system. He's had cards fall apart on him before. He's turned down the Chael Sonnen fight, and remember the UFC card fell. So he just hasn't been a great role model for the sport. And I think if you asked him, he's probably aware of that. I think he's working right now on reshaping his image and everything, but it doesn't change the fact that Jon's not the best to ever do it. I don't think there's ever been anyone better. All right, so let's talk about how could we not bring up Floyd Mayweather boxing Tenshin Nasukawa, right? So hold on, let me paint you a picture. Excuse me. You've got a 21, 22-year-old kid, maybe at the oldest, 4 MMA fights, a long list of kickboxing fights, which is normal because people start kickboxing in like Muay Thai young, right? Like they start boxing at a young age and put up a lot of fights and experience. But zero professional boxing matches, and you are going to put him in a 3-round exhibition to headline an MMA event against the greatest defensive boxer, 50-0, never lost a fight of all time. How in the world does that make any sense? And how did anyone expect the outcome to be anything different than what it was? I'm not making any assumptions about whether it was rigged. It's just like, that's going to happen every single time. You took away the one thing that would have been an equalizer in the fight, and that's kicks. He's never boxed anyone, and you're going to put him in there again. I don't even know how this fight is allowed to happen. How is it legally allowed to happen? If you were to throw the kicks in there, I could understand that because Floyd's never dealt with that in a professional setting, or in a live setting. You know what I mean? Like in front of people on a stage. But to just have him, so I was a big advocate of Conor fighting Floyd because Conor was at the pinnacle of MMA. He represented everything that MMA was at the time, right? Like if you knew there were people who didn't know necessarily what MMA was, but they knew who Conor is, right? So you've got this guy who is a massive superstar. He's in his prime, and most of his wins stem by way of knockout from him punching people in the fucking face. He's got death in his hands. So that fight made sense again against an old, reserved, defensive boxer. I know Floyd wasn't as reserved younger in his career, but as he got older, he definitely was. So that makes sense. But to put on this fight for Floyd to just make $9 million, like, I don't understand how he made that much off of it because I don't understand the demand. Where's the demand coming from? Who wanted to see this fight so badly? I would have 100% been interested if you allowed even leg kicks. I don't even know how big of a difference that would have made if Floyd really wanted to get him the fuck out of there. But if you allow a full range of kicks, I mean, it completely changes everything. But having a boxing match against a kid with no boxing matches, that makes no fucking sense. What else do I got listed on here? Oh, PFL had a big event on New Year's Eve, and this is important to talk about because they crowned 6 different champions, and they gave the winners all $1 million. $1 million. They had a tournament. People advanced through the tournament, and if you won, you got $1 million fucking bucks on New Year's Eve. Pretty good way to start 2019 off, right? Magomed Karamov beat Ray Cooper in an upset for the welterweight title. Felipe Lins defeated Josh Copeland via 4th-round TKO for the light heavyweight title. Sean O'Connell beat Vinny Magalhaes in a little bit of an upset via TKO to win the heavyweight strap. Schulte defeated Rashid Magomedov via unanimous decision for the lightweight belt. Lance Palmer beat Steven Seiler via unanimous decision for the 145-pound belt. Sorry, my throat. I got something fucking in my throat or something. And where was that? Oh, Kayla Harrison defeated Moriel Kerneski via first-round TKO. She's like a judo phenom. Probably going to make her way into the UFC before too long. She was also on Impractical Jokers, tossing Murr around, if you've ever seen that show. So if you want to know who she is, check it out. What else do we got? Oh, someone tried to rob Poliana Viana in Brazil, and she fucked the guy up. You can go to Dana White's Instagram and get pictures of it, and see the pictures of it rather. But I'm sure you can find detailed articles. I don't know all the details about what happened, but apparently some guy came up, tried to rob her. She hit him. It looks like she hit him more than a couple times. I mean, his face is pretty fucking busted up. Put him in a rear naked choke and then called the police. So don't be fucking with women in general, but don't be fucking with women who know how to fight, right? Like, she's going to beat your ass. If you've got no sort of formal training at all, 10 out of 10 times you're going to get your ass beat by her, right? I mean, I don't think people realize what they're seeing when they're watching fighting sometimes. Like, I think a lot of people look at it and they're like, okay, yeah, these dudes are duking it out. Like, if I got in there, they'd probably beat me, but I think I'd have a chance. No, you wouldn't. Right now, I'll shut that down. You wouldn't. If you don't have any type of formal training, you don't have a fucking prayer. Even if it is a girl, she's going to light your ass up. It's just, I mean, unless you had a massive size advantage on a very small woman who was a trained fighter, it's going to be very hard to overwhelm her. She's going to know how to defend herself. And even if you're like on top of her, she's going to know jiu-jitsu, and you're going to get tired before her. So it's only a matter of time. Even if you do think you're winning the fight, you're probably not. But anyway, good to see Polyana Viana out there beating ass beat some dude's ass who tried to rob her. So pretty sweet. All right, what else we got? Oh, some big fight announcements. These are all going to be on the same card. Jon Jones is fighting Anthony Smith. Cody Garbrandt is fighting Pedro Munhoz. And Kamaru Usman is going to get the title fight against Tyron Woodley. So let's start off with Garbrandt versus Munhoz, because the other two are going to be co-main and main, I'm guessing. They're going to be in March at UFC 235. So Cody Garbrandt, ex-champion, right? And what makes this fight interesting is that Cody primarily is a boxer. He likes to stand up on his feet, throw his hands around, And Pedro Munhoz has a black belt, and he's competent on his feet. He's got some knockouts on his records. He's got a lot of submissions. He's sneaky. He's very good. He's beaten Rob Font. I can't remember off the top of my head who he just beat in his last fight. Fuck. I can't remember. I think he knocked him out, though, and he's on a 2-fight win streak right now, I believe. And this is a big fight for Cody, because if Cody wants to get back on the path to title contention, I mean, he just lost to TJ twice. He's facing the first ever skid of his career, and this is a way to get back on the wagon and get rolling again and get your name back in the title mix. So it's a big fight for him. Hard fight, too. Make no mistake, Pedro Munhoz is a fucking killer. So, great fight at 135 pounds. Kamaru Usman ended up getting the fight against Tyron Woodley. And as a fan of the sport, from a purist perspective, as a fan of the sport, that's the fight that I want to see. I think that it's a more competitive fight, personally. Nothing against Colby. I think that it's more interesting. And if you look at the way that both of them beat Rafael dos Anjos, Colby did it first, but I think Usman did it better. So here's where I have a fucking issue. You give Colby Covington the interim title on the grounds that he is to unify it after beating Rafael dos Anjos. He's promised to fight against Tyron Woodley to try to unify the belt. So I'm not a big fan of interim titles for a couple of reasons. First off, this example right here is probably the main reason why I'm opposed to it. You handed out a belt to a guy who was deserving of a title shot. Say what you want about Colby Covington and his antics, but he beat Rafael dos Anjos. He beat Damian Maia. He was in line for the title, and he was supposed to fight next, so you gave him the interim belt. But now you go back on your word because Kamaru Usman had a more impressive performance. What in the fuck was the point in handing out the belt in the first place? The only time that I'm not opposed to interim belts is when they're absolutely necessary. Like, say, for example, that you've got a fighter and he's your champion and he's been out for like a year and a half, going on 2 years, like Dominic Cruz, right? Like, Dominic Cruz is hurt all the time and you're like, fuck, we got to get a guy in here to fight for the title. That makes sense. The division's on hold. You got to move it along and keep figuring out who's at the top of the food chain. But when you've got guys like Woodley, who are maybe not the most active fighters in the world, but they're relatively active, like, what's the point? Here's the other issue I have with handing out interim belts. You say that you don't want to add more weight classes because you're afraid of watering the sport down, right? But that doesn't make any fucking sense because you're handing out meaningless belts to people and you're tasking your audience with keeping track of more champions. It doesn't, like, if you don't want to create more weight classes so people don't have to keep track of more champions, why are you handing out all these interim belts that don't actually mean anything? I mean, you're talking about potentially creating a more competitive pool where things are more fair and the fighters aren't putting themselves through as much and you get a more complete version of them when they get to the octagon on fight night. And it just doesn't make sense that you're opposed to that, but you're okay with slapping interim belts on people. Do you know how much confusion that creates about who's the actual champion to the like non-hardcore fan? Like, you're going on ESPN, a major platform, and you're going to have people tuning into this and they're going to look at it and go, oh, wait, this guy's a champ, but why does this guy have an interim belt? Doesn't he have a belt? It's going to be so hard for them to get into the sport. So I don't like the idea. I think the interim belts water the sport down much more than adding more weight classes and more divisions would be. I think it waters down way more. That's my major complaint with those. And, the Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith fight. Here's why this fight is interesting. And Anthony Smith is coming in as a big underdog, as he should, deservedly so. Jon Jones, we just talked about how great he was. But what Anthony Smith represents is a guy with a lot of fights. He's 36-13, and he has been surging lately. He's 30 years old, so he's arguably still in his prime. They think you come into your prime around what, like 21, 31, 28 to 31, somewhere in between those like 3 years, right? So you've got this guy, and he's been knocking people the fuck out. He's on a 3-fight win streak. He's won I think he's won 14 fights in 4 years. So he's been extremely active, and he's dangerous. He's explosive, maybe the most explosive guy Jon's ever fought, and he's in his prime. That's what makes this fight exciting. That's what makes you want to tune in to see, because here's and I want to see it with Khabib too. I want to know what the fucking answer is. It's not that I root for Jon to lose. I love watching him fight. I think he's great at what he does, and I'm never disappointed when he wins. But I just want to know, before he's done, it's not that I want to see him lose. I don't want to see any. I hate, that aspect of fighting is so, I know that losing is so difficult for them to deal with, so I don't like seeing any fighter lose. But I just want to know what the fucking answer is. You know what I mean? How do you beat Jon? How do you beat Khabib? What does it take to beat those guys? I want to find out what it is, because we've never seen it before. So maybe Anthony Smith is that answer that nobody's expecting, right? We'll have to wait and fucking see. But the last pay-per-view, UFC 232, is going to be the last one before the UFC switches platforms to ESPN. They're going to be moving away from Fox, going to ESPN, which is a big deal because, by the way, if you're wondering if ESPN Plus is going to be worth it, I think it is, because so far they've got great quality fights like Henry Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw is the first fight headlining the main card of the first. It's the headlining bout of the main card for the first ESPN Plus fight. Sorry, I'm jumbling my words all up, but you get what I'm fucking saying. It's a big fight, and I mean, it seems, and maybe they're just doing this to sucker you in, and they'll start watering the fights down a little bit as the year goes on. But they announced a schedule, and I think you're going to get 12 to 13 fights in the first 6 months, something like that, something crazy, which is a lot of fights. And you got guys like not only Henry Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw, but you've also got Greg Hardy's going to be on that card, Paige Van Zandt, Glover Teixeira. There's a lot of fighters on that card. There's going to be a lot of popular fighters fighting on this ESPN Plus card. Because if you're going to pay for it, they have to make it worth your money. And I also think that the talent pool in the UFC is large enough that you're going to get a lot of quality fights that are happening on a very consistent basis. So I personally think that buying it is worth it. I think you'll look back over the, when this time next year rolls around, you'll look back and be like, yeah, that was worth my $5 a month. I definitely think it's going to be. So, if you're on the fence about investing in it, I would say just fucking do it. It's $5 a month and you get to watch a ton of fights. Totally worth it. All right. Yeah, I'll try to, depending on how much news comes out, maybe I'll get another one of these out this week. If not, I will for sure next week, and we'll definitely be doing a breakdown for the first ESPN Plus card with Henry Cejudo and TJ Dillashaw headlining. That's a really good fight card, and I'm looking forward to it. So stay tuned in on social media, mainly Instagram. That's where I post everything because it's just fucking easier. Just post a picture and a caption, and there you go, right? Don't really use Twitter a whole lot. I have an account made for this on there, but I hardly ever. I think it might alert people when I post stuff on YouTube, which I guess is kind of nice, but I don't really post anything on there. And Facebook as well. On both Facebook and Instagram, just look up Mixed Martial Analysis and you'll find us. What else we got? Oh, hit the subscribe button below if you like. Leave questions or comments in the comment section so that I can address them on the next podcast. And thank you for listening. Have a good one. Bye.